The HOA president stood on my dock at 7 in the morning, heels clacking against the cedar planks I'd just finished staining last summer, her voice shrill enough to shatter the mountain calm. She was waving a cease and desist letter like it was some kind of medieval weapon, perfume so sweet it made the diesel from my '87 Chris Craft seem almost pleasant. This rust bucket is gone by Friday, Sterling, or I'm calling my lawyer and the sheriff. That's how Karen Whitmore does things. She threatens, stomps, trespasses, then pretends she's doing you a favor by maintaining standards. She couldn't know, that the lake she kept shrieking about wasn't hers, wasn't the HOA's, wasn't community, anything. Every drop of water, all 47 acres of it, belonged to me. But here's what you learn about bullies if you hang around long enough. They'll always announce exactly how they plan to destroy themselves. So I just sipped my coffee, watched the sunrise burn off the mist, and let Karen dig her own grave. And honestly, what would you do if someone tried to steal your property right in front of your face? Yeah, that happened. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from and what your worst HOA horror story is. Let me back up. 18 months earlier, I retired from 25 years in Army logistics and thought I'd found peace in the Colorado mountains. My uncle Theodore, family oddball, stamp collector, the guy who kept cash in cookie jars, left me a small cabin on a lake so quiet you could hear loons calling at dawn and almost forget the world existed. It was just me, 2 bedrooms, 1 sagging porch, and a view that made my pulse slow down for the first time in decades. 12 houses lined the shore, just regular folks, nothing fancy. I figured I'd live out my days fixing up boats, minding my own business, and maybe, finally, sleeping through the night. Enter Karen. 3 houses down, moved in with her husband Derek. He's got political ambitions, city council, and all that. She's got the BMW, the blinding teeth, and a compulsion for control. Within 2 weeks, she's HOA president. Not because anyone wanted her, but because nobody else wanted the job. She introduced herself while I was out working on my boat engine, a 3-year project that was as much therapy as machinery. She smiled that realtor smile and dropped her first warning shot. We maintain certain standards around here. The way she said standards made it sound like a threat and a joke at the same time. Karen zeroed in on my boat from the start, said it was too big, too noisy, didn't match the aesthetic vision. Funny, since half the docks had boats just as long, but rules are only rules if Karen says so. Her perfume lingered on the dock after she left, like a bad omen. Then, of course, the violation notice showed up. Official letterhead, legal threats, $200 a day fines for an oversized recreational vessel. I just laughed and did what the Army taught me, gathered intel. If Karen wanted a fight, I needed to know who I was up against and what Uncle Theodore had really left me. 3 days later, Karen called an emergency HOA meeting, Wednesday, 2 in the afternoon, when anyone with a job couldn't attend. I showed up anyway, deployment notebook in hand, coffee in my thermos, ready for the show. Her house looked like a modern art museum nobody wanted to visit. She'd assembled her board, 3 retirees who nodded at everything she said, plus Derek lurking in the corner. And then she hit us with a 20-slide PowerPoint about my boat, complete with low-angle photos that made it look like the Titanic docked in a kiddie pool. I just took notes, let her monologue, then politely asked about the actual size restrictions. She didn't like that. I pointed out Derek's own jet skis and cigarette boat. He gulped audibly. And by the way, I checked his dock extension permit at City Hall. Turns out there wasn't one. Funny how that works. Right then, Betty Jamie's Buick pulled up, retired English teacher, 73, cookies in hand, and sharp enough to cut steel. She deflated Karen's entire show by reminiscing about classic boats and, in a not-so-subtle whisper, suggesting I check Theodore's basement for old legal documents. Karen's poker face fell apart. That was my first real clue. Bullies only win if you don't know the rules. The meeting ended with vague promises of more research. I walked home smelling rain on the air, knowing the storm was just getting started. Karen escalated fast. She called in a city inspector, Rodriguez, clipboard, exhausted eyes. Anonymous tip, of course. I could see Karen spying from her BMW as Rodriguez measured and photographed every inch of my dock. You're up to code. Better than code, he said, shaking his head at the end. And when he left, there was a petition taped to my door, 7 signatures, including Karen and Derek, painting me as a transient and unstable element. She even started telling neighbors I was a PTSD case, that my boat was compensation for psychological issues. Betty called, voice sharp with anger. She wasn't having any of it. That night, I dug into public records. Derek had funneled $18,000 in HOA funds to his brother's landscaping company, emergency improvements that never happened. Karen? 2 complaints on her real estate license for misrepresentation and aggressive tactics. Phil, a contractor who built half the docks around here, showed up with a couple of beers and a story. Karen had tried to pay him to find something wrong with my dock. When that didn't work, she started asking about water rights and property boundaries. She was obsessed. So, I listened to Betty and started digging in Theodore's basement, boxes of documents dating back to the 60s, property surveys, lawyer letters, deeds. Emma, my daughter, came up from college, all fire and brains, and together we pieced it together. Theodore didn't just buy a cabin. He bought the lake. Every deed, every water right, every navigation privilege. He owned it all, right out from under the developer during a bankruptcy sale. Every other house owned to the water's edge, but not the water itself. It was mind-blowing. I called Jennifer Patel, a lawyer Betty recommended. When she saw the documents, her excitement was electric. This isn't an HOA dispute, Marcus. This is 30 years of trespassing. The HOA has no authority over the lake. It's yours, all of it. And just like that, Karen's entire war fell apart. I let her keep digging, piling up threats and legal bills, while Jennifer prepared the paperwork. Karen went nuclear, filed an actual lawsuit, demanded $5,000, tried to get the media involved, even claimed adverse possession of the lake because the community had used it for 30 years. The morning after I got served, I found sugar in my boat's gas tank. Sabotage. Phil's cameras caught Derek sneaking around, but the image was too grainy for proof. Sarah, my old JAG buddy, joined the team. Vandalism? Fraud? Civil rights violations? She said, listing Karen's missteps. She's toast. We documented everything. Karen's smear campaign made the local news. She played the victim. I was the dangerous veteran. But her fatal mistake? Repeating community lake and shared waters on camera, creating a public record of her misunderstanding. When Karen called her final accountability meeting, she went all out. Stenographer, city councilman, news cameras, a crowd that spilled out of the community center. She planned a show trial, complete with dramatic speeches about shared resources and community harmony. I let her talk, let her lawyer talk, let them pile it on. Then I stood, laid out the real deeds, maps, legal history. I own the lake. Every inch. Every drop. Jennifer walked the room through 40 years of property law, environmental reports, conservation plans. Karen's face drained of color. The entire room shifted. Relief, disbelief, outrage. I could close the lake today, I said. But I won't, because unlike some people, I believe in being a good neighbor. Karen resigned the next day, for sale sign in her yard before dinner. Betty got elected HOA president on a platform of treat people like humans. Phil organized monthly cleanups, veterans fishing tournaments. Jennifer started helping other homeowners fight HOA bullies, always telling them, know your rights before someone else pretends they own them. Theodore's conservation fund became a local legend. The lake was designated a protected site, community access guaranteed by law. Karen tried to join another HOA in Durango. Word had spread, and they turned her down cold. Now, every evening I sit on my dock, coffee in hand, watching families fish and kids swim in water that's been protected for 60 years. The loons call. The air smells of pine and barbecue and victory. Sometimes justice is just making something beautiful enough that the people who tried to destroy it can only watch from the sidelines. That's what happens when bullies pick a fight with the wrong neighbor, the one who knows the actual rules. So, what would you do if someone tried to steal your property out from under you? Drop your HOA horror stories below. We read every single one. And who knows, maybe your nightmare is our next story. If you got a kick out of this, hit like, leave your take in the comments, and subscribe for more weekly HOA chaos. Trust me, you don't want to miss the next one.